Welcome to the Work Hard, Play Hard podcast. My name is Rob Murgatroyd, and I'm a former doctor turned lifestyle entrepreneur. Each week, I interview some of the best minds on the planet on the science of achievement and the art of fulfillment. Come take this journey with me. Excuses are over. It's time to live.
Any single job I saw someone do, I would watch them do it. I'd study them. I still do this today. I would model the best person I saw doing it. So whoever was doing the best, I'd model exactly what they did and try and add another 10% or another 15% more creativity. But what I found was when we go outside the comfort zone, like we allow ourselves to feel that feeling of fear and discomfort long enough, we find something that we can't possibly discover inside. Extraordinary is a state of mind. Extraordinary is in the worst moments, in the hardest times, the times where you're really dragging your sorry ass around, that you realize how grateful you are to just be alive. And then the extraordinary happens.
What's up, everybody? This is Rob Murgatroyd, and welcome to another episode of the Work Hard, Play Hard show. This episode features business leader, author, trainer, coach, and humanitarian David Wood. You can find him on Instagram and elsewhere at David T.S. Wood. So I wanted to have David on this show because he isn't just someone who knows how to work hard and play hard. He embodies it. In fact, to date, I haven't had a guest on the show that embodies this balance in the way that David does. I first connected with David at a much deeper level at an event where my wife and I had the privilege of sharing the stage with him. We watched him captivate the audience, not through his amazing ability to just move the room, but rather through his ability to get people to embrace stepping out of their comfort zones. It's like watching a beautiful magic trick to watch him do this. In this episode, David will take you on a ride challenging your current thinking from parenting to business to your current comfort zones. In this conversation, we talk about everything, how his history teacher telling him he'd wind up in jail changed his life entirely, how he went on a trip and decided to not come home and travel for the next 10 years straight. We'll also talk about the adrenaline week that he created for his children that has turned into them now traveling the world before they go to college. There's a great story about his son hitchhiking through Japan and sleeping in a restaurant. Be sure to take a screenshot of this episode, share it on the socials, and remember to tag me and David T.S. Wood and let us know what you thought of it. So without further ado, please enjoy this conversation I had with David Wood. David, welcome to the show.
Wow. I am so excited. I'm so excited for you. I'm excited to be on the show, and I just can't wait. I love shows like this where you just push record and we just go.
And we just go. You know, I've been looking forward to this for so long, and there really are no words that can do an intro to your life any meaningful justice. So I'm just going to say thanks for making the time, and we're going to jump right in.
Awesome. Let's do it.
I'd like to begin at the beginning. And you grew up in England, and at around 7 years old, your parents split. And you realized that if you wanted anything, that you're going to have to work for it. So by age 11, you were involved with your first business, and that was the business of breeding and selling guinea pigs. How did that time in your life shape your future business career?
Well, it's interesting, because my mom and dad, when they separated in Germany. And so my dad ostensibly abandoned the family. So we were moved into England under the wards of the state, which means that, we were put into a condemned building, right? So already our life was pretty unusual. So my mom was sort of, absolutely insane at this point because of what was going on in her life, being abandoned in a foreign country. She's got these 3 kids, and we're in this sort of condemned place. So even before I started, doing the guinea pig thing, and sort of, I did lots of things, but guinea pig was one of them. I just realized that, my mom had no money. She's working her tail off. And I started working originally just to buy her cigarettes, because when she smoked, she was nicer. and so I used to go out there and I used to hustle, and I'd come back with a box of cigarettes. I used to be able to buy cigarettes in tens back then. I'm not sure if you can anymore. And so, I was a hustler, right? And so, and in fact, this is terrible to say on your show probably, but I even stole my first 2 guinea pigs from the park because I didn't have any money to buy any. So I thought I had this idea. So first I had to get 2 guinea pigs, and I knew they'd breed really fast. And then we bred rabbits. And at one point, I think I had 38 rabbits and 42 guinea pigs. And I was just selling those. And then I did two paper routes. I washed cars on weekends, and I just hustled. I just go out there, and I just knew if I wanted to have anything in life, I better work for it, right?
So how did they wind up separating in Germany? I'm confused about that because it's England where you're from, right?
Right. My dad was in the army, and my dad and my mom's best friend got together. They're still together 45 years later. So you can imagine there was a bit of tension around that. When someone leaves your mother for their best friend, it was a pretty hard time, and that's why my mom went crazy for many years before she got right with that. So we were in Germany because he was in the military, right?
That's actually a very common thing to happen, even in death. Like, for example, my dad died last year, and I noticed that one of my dad's best friends is hanging around my mom a little bit too much. Yeah, there's something. I'm telling you, there's something to it. Okay. So can you place us back on the day when you were around 15 years old and your history teacher, Mr. Orsler, sat you down and said, you know what? You're never going to amount to anything. You're probably going to wind up in jail. How did that inform your decision to leave school and never look back?
I already disliked school because I wasn't, I used to get beaten up at one point for being a slum kid. When we lived in the East End of London, which is the hardest part of the country, right? And so when the kids realized I lived in this condemned building, I became a target because of poverty. You wonder why I'm wealthy today, right? But at 15, I just, school was back then. I mean, the teachers were allowed to hit you, the kids could hit you. It just wasn't a very functioning kind of place. And I just couldn't wait to get out. But when he sat me down, and him and I had a kind of an interesting rapport. And I mean, I used to do some things to mess him up, and he'd try and get me back, so it wasn't just a one-way street. But he sat me down, he says, David, you're the worst student I've had in 37 years of teaching, and you're probably going to end up in jail or on the streets. And I looked at him, and you imagine what I said. And I got up and I just walked out of school, and I never once thought about going back. It just never crossed my mind again. And it's interesting that I've never been back to school since. I'm 57 coming up here, right? But I also was struggling at home. I mean, my mom and again, I don't want to make this as a sob story because it's not a sob story, but, I hated her. I just said she was just so violent and crazy, and my house was dysfunctional. And I thought, I just got to get out of here. So I walked out of my house and I started hustling like I'd been doing anyway. And, and I've never looked back. And I just, my first job was I worked at an antique restore picture framers, and it looked like a scene out of Oliver Twist. I can't make this stuff up. It was it really was. You went into this dark, sort of dingy basement, and there was fine powder in the air. But we made some really interesting frames for some of the most beautiful masters in the world. Picasso and Rembrandt's. And so I was around art, and I collect art today. That influence sort of stayed with me. But it was like living in Oliver Twist land. I mean, I was getting paid 40 pence an hour, which you think about then. I mean, I'm not that old. But it was like Dickens, and you'd work 60, 70 hours a week just to sort of be able to pay your bills and hustle. And that's when I really sort of started reaching out on my own, was just at that age, 15, 16. And I started dating a lot of older women, which actually influenced me again because they taught me how to think more like an adult than I was. I was this kind of angry kid. And then these older women in my life started to sort of temper me out a little bit and sort of just show me a little bit of what the world was about, right?
You mentioned 40 pence per hour. I don't know if there's an app that I can use to do that currency translation, but is 40 pence 40 cents?
Yeah, you could say that back then. Yeah, something like that. I mean, we're talking about a long time ago. It may have been about 35 cents an hour back then.
Wow.
And, and that was normal, but what was really interesting about the British culture back then, and probably still is that we were taught. So my boss paid me in cash, and he paid me as low as he possibly could. And then I'd also collect pogie. And that was, all of us did it. And it's what we do. One day a week, we'd come in with smart clothes on, and we'd go down to the pogie office, and we'd get pogie, and that would balance out. So we'd earn a little bit more from that. But we were all kind of cheating the government. I mean, it's a welfare state, right? And that's how I grew up. I grew up thinking those thoughts that, if you want to get ahead, you cheat and you sort of lie, and you sort of, it was a little bit like that. And I wouldn't change a thing, to be quite honest with you. So.
All right, so let's fast forward a little bit. So by 20, you were running pubs underage, chimney sweeping, doing landscaping, among many other things. But I have to know, because the thought of you sweeping a chimney is just not making sense in my brain. What's the playbook for a good chimney sweeper?
Oh gosh, listen to this. This is crazy, because I had a window cleaning round. What happened? I tell you how I became a window cleaner. I was working at this place, 40 pence an hour. I came home, and my girlfriend at the time, she says, one of your kids from school, or one of your school friends was here today, and he cleaned our windows. And I said, well, how much you pay him? And it was like £4 or something. It's like what I'd earned the whole day, right? And I said, what? I started doing big pubs, big manor homes, and it was amazing. I suddenly felt freedom. I had a 3-wheel car. I made of fiberglass. My ladder's on the top, right? And I felt like I was free. And some days I'd make £100. So I went from making 40 pence an hour to making £100 in a day. And from that led to people saying, hey, do you know a chimney sweep? And so I phoned this. I see this equipment for sale. And I found this guy. I said, hey, listen, you want to sell your equipment? And he says, yeah. So I said, well, listen, I'll canvass a route, and then you come out for a day and you teach me how to be a chimney sweep. He says, you're on. So anyway, he shows up and he's got the flu. He says, Dave, I can't come with you. Sorry. And so we're in a parking lot of an Asda food or something like that. And he's showing me without a chimney, he's teaching me like in the parking lot how to sweep a chimney. So I throw the chimney sweeping stuff in the back of the car. I go to this first house. And again, I can't make this stuff up. Little old lady comes to the door. She says, okay, she says, come in. And I said, listen, I got to tell you, I said, the way I work, I don't like people to be around in the room. So I'm going to ask you to stay in the kitchen. It's just the way I am. Because I had no idea what I was doing, right? And I go in there, she's got this cream shag pile. Back then, shag pile was in, but it's a cream shag pile carpet. And I'm carrying this dirty chimney sweeper with absolutely zero idea, except knowing that, how many brushes, and how to screw it on. And then as you push it up, you twist, come down, twist, put on another rod, up you go, right? And that's how I started. And I'm telling you, man, that first one, I don't even know if I swept the chimney. All I know is I stuck some brushes up. There's a lot of shit fell down. And I was sweating and panicking. And all I could think was, don't leave a mess on the carpet.
Oh my God. All right. So let's speed the clock up just a little bit further to when you left England with 12 buddies on a week vacation to North Africa. And you decided at the last minute that you were going to stay in Tunisia with the $2,000 that you had left in your money belt. Can you walk us through what it was like dealing with the fear that was associated with not speaking Arabic, not knowing about their culture, and in what way did this trip inoculate you for future trips?
It's interesting because I just pulled out a diary that I'd written, and it was £500. It wasn't $2,000. I always thought it was that. I've said it for years, and I read through my diary, and I actually had £500, which was, again, a lot less. I played on a darts team, and our team won the league. So we decided we were going to go for 6 days to Tunisia, and it's 12 of us. And we go, 13 with me, and we go to Tunisia. It's just like a drunk fest. We're all-inclusive resort. We don't go out. I have no idea where Tunisia is. I couldn't point to it on a map. I didn't even know it was in North Africa, right? And so, when they get to leave, I'd been stirring. There'd been something stirring inside of me. And it was triggered by something. I rarely talked about this stuff, but I'd actually been invited to a meditation class by this girl I was seeing. And it led to me writing poetry. And I started writing this really bizarre poetry. And it was just kind of like in this kind of state of clarity, I was writing this stuff that was telling me that there was more to life than I was experiencing, right? Hustle, booze, darts, drugs, and it was just like that, sex and drugs and rock and roll. And so in Tunisia, I had this stirring already. And when they left, I remember, and I'm writing about it right now in my book, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I was immobilized with fear. And I'm standing at the airport watching this plane take off, and I'm drenched in sweat. And I know when I turn around, right, I have to step into this world. I have no idea what it is. And I start walking, and all I remember is like walking through pea soup. Everything was just like this overwhelming sense of fear. And what I did was the only thing I knew to do is go back to the same hotel because I knew where it was. And I stayed and I spent a week there. And I almost blew. I mean, half my money was gone by the time that week was over. And I was terrified to go out. I didn't know what to do. And then the hustler kicked in. I thought, Dave, and I kept looking at my passport thinking there's one stamp, it's Tunisia. And I thought, you know what? And when I get back, I'm going to show everyone where I've been. Because this wasn't about me. This is about, ego and proof and blah, 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 right? And I went down to the pool and there was these 4 girls sitting there. And I talked to them and they said something like, and they were scared. They were scared to go down to the local Medina. And I said to him, I know the area really well. I'm just lying, but BSing, right? I said, if you want, I can take you there tomorrow. I'll charge you a fee, right? And so I actually went that afternoon and I took the bus down to the Medina and I took it back 3 times to know the route. And then I walked through the Medina and I just followed and I followed tour groups and I just stand and watch what they were talking about and listen. And then the next morning I pick these girls up and I take them down and I show them this route that I planned for like 5 hours, right? They think I'm brilliant and I say all these things that I heard these other people say. They gave me $100. They bought me dinner. I'm thinking, hold on, I'm into something here, right? So then I start hustling a little bit and making a little bit of money. And it started my trip. That trip led to 42 countries, 10 and a half years backpacking around the world, right? And you asked me the question, how did it set me up? It took a year and a half for the fear in my stomach to go. And I was still that knot and into Israel. And I was living in Israel for about a year. But I remember the day the fear suddenly was gone. I knew it was always there. I knew I always felt this tension in my stomach, like I was going to throw up. But one day it stopped. And it was when I started to see people and realize that people are just the same as me. And that, and I started to fall in love with people on a whole other level.
So what are some of the things that you did to make money while you were going through this? Because there's a lot of people who have this, this gnawing inside their body and they're like, I just, I got to get out of doing what I'm doing right now. And, even people in their late 20s and early 30s and, take a trip, but they don't take a trip and then decide not to come home and to spend the next 10 years continuing to travel. What was it that was inside of you that allowed you to do that, as opposed to saying, I got to go back to school, I got to go back to work, I got to get married, I got to have kids, all that shit?
Well, the truth is I had there was no safe harbor, right? My mom had nothing. My dad, I tried phoning my dad collect and he refused to call. I mean, because I actually broke all the bones in the right side of my face in Israel and I ended up, having a major operation and my dad wouldn't even take the call, right? So it was like, here I am. I didn't feel like there was anywhere to go back to. And so, and to be able to succeed in these different arenas, the muscles I had to develop, which was immediate rapport, and people had to trust me because, to get a job and work illegally, people have to give you cash. It's a risk for them as well, right? So there was muscles that had to come along with this. And then what happened was, as I say, when my mind opened up and I started seeing the world differently, I started seeing opportunities differently. And I started doing things because I wanted to do them. I started doing things because I loved to do them. So I became a sports organizer of a big kibbutz, this big hotel. I started off as carrying suitcases off the bus. I'd make tips. And then what I did was I got to know the guy who ran everything. And I was always asking for more. I was always pushing. I always work harder. I'd watch any single job I saw someone do. I would watch them do it. I'd study them. I still do this today. I would model the best person I saw doing it. So whoever was doing the best, I'd model exactly what they did and try and add another 10% or another 15% more creativity. And so I'd go into these jobs and I would kick butt right away and I would work my tail off. And typically I'd say, look, let me work for free. Just give me somewhere to stay. And what I'd do is, I'd get a place. Sometimes I'd be sleeping on someone's boat, or, they'd have a little house somewhere, all different places. And then what I do after 4 days, 5 days, and when they could see how hard I work and what I could bring to them, then I'd say, look, I'm sorry, I've got to go. And they say, why? I said, well, I need to make some money. I just got to live as well. They say, no, we'll pay you. Well, I said, I don't have a work permit. Well, don't worry, we'll pay you cash. And that's kind of how I do it. So I'd always give, there's that saying, people want, they say, give me fire, then I'll give you wood, right?
Was there a part of you that just longed for a relationship or, a girlfriend, or to, have some sense of normalcy? Or was it just pure adrenaline that you just couldn't stop?
No, I met girls everywhere. Because part of, the charm, and, so I was often, I'd always be really honest to go. I say, look, I'm a traveler. If you want to experience something like full out right now, but it's just not going to last because I'm moving. But if you want to, so a lot of girls would sort of go on that journey with me of experiencing something on a much deeper level, but for a short space of time. And I never lied. I never played that game. But so I was constantly in different types of relationships. And then I met a girl that her and I dated for a couple of years, and she just met me in different parts of the world. She was from Germany, and she met me in different parts of the world. So I don't think I yearned for that. And I didn't know what normal was. I didn't grow up in normal. And to be honest, what's happening right now, my youngest son is hitchhiking across Japan right now, and he just traveled all the way through China. He's just 18. And I wanted him to get a sense of what this feels like to overcome fear. And so we spent a week in New Zealand doing, adrenaline every single day, something that scared him. And I said, all I want you to do, Ben, is I want you to feel fear and understand what it feels like in your body and understand how you can navigate it. So we did bungee jumps, we skydived from 15,000 feet, we did whitewater rafting. Every day we did something that scared him. And Neva's bungee jump scared the bejesus out of him. But what I started to notice was he started to understand the feeling of fear. And if you understand the definition of fear, it's the anticipation of pain. The anticipation of pain. A lot of people think it's false evidence appearing real, but the actual definition is the anticipation of pain. And so when you're traveling, and why a lot of people don't, when they want to go on vacation, they go to all-inclusive resorts, or they want to go places that feel like home. It's because of that anticipation. The brain is tricking them. But what I found was when we go outside the comfort zone, like Ben is right now, hitchhiking across Japan, when we stay outside long enough and we allow ourselves to feel that feeling of fear and discomfort long enough, we find something that we can't possibly discover inside. And what it starts to happen is we start to develop a self-trust, a self-knowing. I trust myself in any situation. I don't care what it is, what it looks like, where it is in the world, drop me in the middle of anywhere. But that comes from me constantly putting myself in that sort of uncomfortable zone. And that's what I'm doing with both my kids. My other son's in Mexico right now. I said, look, just travel for 1 or 2 years, come back, know more about who you are, then make choices for your life. Then choose which path you want to go on, right?
Do you pay for their trips, or do they pay for their trips?
Well, it's a combination, because I do believe, Western culture is kind of weird. If we grew up in India, if you and I were Indian brothers, we would live together and we would help each other. And we would help each other buy our first house. We'd help each other buy our second house. So culturally, some cultures support young people. In North America, it's like, off you go. Some parents will help with schooling, but it's almost like you leave the nest and you go and do it on your own. In some cultures, they do it as a family. And I've sort of learned from that. So with Benny, he's traveling, he had $22 a day, right? So he earned a couple of $1,000s before he left. But we did 2.5 months, 9 countries together. And I paid for that, but he had to work. So he was working and he was contributing to my work. So he came to the events. He helped with some video. He was doing different things for me, right? But on his own here, he won't ask for it. He's like me. He won't ask for a penny. And so last 3 days ago, he slept in a restaurant booth. The reason he's hitchhiking is because he can't afford to stay in a hotel or a hostel and to travel. So he's opted for hitchhiking, and he tries to find these cheap hostels. But he's like, Dad, I don't need help. I can do this on my own, right? My eldest son's slightly different. He's on a 1-year trip around the world with an organization. So we paid for that as part of his graduation. And, he worked for 4 months or 5 months, and he saved up $4,000 or $5,000 to go with him. But we contributed to that. So does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Now, here's what's interesting, because I'm a father too. And the thought of, I'm just going to be dead honest with you, the thought of my daughter sleeping in, and maybe it's different with gender, I don't know, but the thought of her hitchhiking, sleeping in, a hotel, in a restaurant booth freaks me out, makes me feel like, I got to, like, I want to, like, as you're telling this story, I want to get in a helicopter and go save them. And that's probably the work that I need to do, because because look, let's be honest, it would mean nothing to you to send him a check for any amount you wanted to send him. You certainly have the means to do it, but it doesn't seem to phase you negatively to allow him to go through this experience. Can you kind of just explain that?
Yeah, I think there's two things, and we should talk about. I live in Canada. I work in the US a lot. I've traveled all over the world, 84 countries, and I'm still traveling. I love to try and see 2 or 3 new countries a year. I think that America, if there's a distinction between culture, and I'm really big on culture, cultural nuances and cultural distinctions. And I think the difference in American culture, but parents or most moms would be fearful, most dads would be fearful for their children. But America has a lot more fear associated with hitchhiking because, the way that you tell the news, one person's killed hitchhiking, and now hitchhiking is this thing you'd never do, blah, blah, blah. And I watched how the news is so insidious, where in some countries, Japan, Ben's loving hitchhiking. He's met so many cool people hitchhiking. And, a little old lady came out and gave him a bottle of water when he was standing on the side of the street. And a businessman came out and said, hey, listen, I want to give you a tip. Your sign, you're asking to go too far. Japanese people won't think that way. Change the sign. And he got picked up in 5 minutes. So what this experience is doing is for him to develop his capacity to talk to people who are not like him. Because at the end of the day, we know that, whether Ben decides to go to school or not, if he has these people skills and he has this capacity to see and understand culture and to reach into people and they feel something really special about him, he's going to succeed at anything he wants in life. Right? Those muscles are imperative. But if we walk around in fear, and if I was like, oh my God, and I do there's moments where I sit there and go, I hope he's all right. I just hope he's all right. Now, remember, my parents couldn't ever talk to me. There wasn't such a thing as WeChat or anything else like that. I can reach out and say, how you doing, bud? And he says, hey, Dad, I'm great, having a great time. He tells me a story, and boom. So I can actually touch him and make sure, if I have that niggly feeling. But, his mom, she afraid, she has been, but she's watching them develop, and she's seeing their character and their resiliency and their honor and their, all these things coming from being outside of what they know.
Is his mom like you in as far as all the things that we've been talking about? Was she a traveler? Was she away for a long period of time? Or are you guys very different?
She's Swedish. So she did travel. She was a business owner. But once she had babies, she became quite fearful. And so, she does worry. She worries a lot. And, when Ben and I were doing Adrenaline Week, I said, let's send her the photographs afterwards. Right? Let's not send them to her during Adrenaline Week, right? And when she saw him, she's like, oh my God. But she also gets, so there's a part of her that realizes what we're doing right now. But she has a whole lot of fear that she carries, as I think a lot of mothers do. But she's not letting it get in the way of their experience. But she wants them to be careful. She wants them to, she wants them to be sensible. I want that too. But I also realize, let's go back to your life. Think of how many crazy things you've done. And if your parents knew about it, they go, oh my God, if I'd known that, I'd never let you out. Right?
It's so true.
Right? And this is what generations do to each other. And I'm like, Ben, just go there. Look, and I said to him when we were doing Adrenaline Week, I said, you know what? There's a chance we won't make it, right? But it's not going to be from skydiving. It's going to be from taking the bus to skydiving. Because statistically, the most dangerous thing we do every single day is drive our freaking cars, right? Statistically. And here we do that with no thinking. If I say to you, listen, let's go and, hike in the woods for a weekend, most people are terrified because they're going to think they're not thinking about the woods, they're thinking about the bear that's going to eat them in the woods. Right?
So Ben took a gap year. Is that right?
Well, he just left school. I don't want to call it a gap year because it may turn into 5 years. I don't know. I don't love school anyway, and I never loved it. And so it's hard for me to tell them to go and get I say follow your passion. And so Ben has a passion in music and, in the arts, and we'll see. But he also loves network marketing, and I'm a professional network marketer, and it's something that he really thinks he wants to do and pursue. So that may be his thing. We'll see. My oldest son, he's a homebody. Even though he's traveled for a year, I can see him marrying young and not having this big vision for his life. I can see him being really happy in a relationship. So I have two very different boys, right?
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about your business and what you do, but I want to give some context before we get there. So let's talk a little bit about the event that you attended, which was a Think and Grow Rich 3-day training event that really expanded your money mindset and increased your income from $4 an hour to $10,000 a month. Can you kind of walk us through that time in your life?
Yeah, so I was in Canada. I'd fallen in love with the country. I'd left it like 3 times. I was working as a dishwasher, $4 an hour, and then I became the waiter in the same restaurant. Same thing I do. I take the lowest job, I do it extremely well, and then sort of work my way through the ranks very fast, right? Became a waiter, became the number one selling waiter. And the guy who owns these, there was one restaurant, and there's 14 now. Him and I are really close friends, and we always laugh about, him giving me my start in Canada. But someone showed me an old VCR, kind of video of an opportunity for a network marketing company. And I watched it like 40 times, and I'm thinking, really? I can do this and create freedom. And so I understood freedom because I've been living freedom my whole life, right? I've been free of everything. I had no car. I had I was a free spirit in the world for 10 and a half years. And so I got the freedom piece. So I joined a network marketing company, bombed, failed miserably. And so I joined another one, and they had a 2.5-day program where I was asked to read Think and Grow Rich. And it was my first exposure to personal development. And I'm thinking, really, if I could think differently, I could become wealthy. And so I remember, changing how I approached my life, like a radical shift on what was showing up. I created my first vision board, and I started to sort of really pursue this idea that if I helped enough people get what they want, I'd get what I wanted. And I remember when I got that first $10,000 check for a month, I remember looking at it and thinking, no one in my whole life told me I was worth $10,000. None. No one's ever said that, Dave. You can do whatever you want, Dave. You can make whatever you want, Dave. And I turned that into 20 and then 30 and then 40, then 50, and then 100, and it was just this idea that the numbers didn't matter. It just mattered about how did I contribute or what I could give, right? And it wasn't that easy, by the way, because I failed. That company was closed down. I sort of navigated. I bought a restaurant and bar. I had a natural products distribution company, so I got back into conventional business. I started growing companies. And again, but in a non-conventional way. Everything was really like, our natural products distribution company was all over Canada, every health food store. We were the pioneers of racking, wooden racks at the end of the main racks. We were the people that pioneered that. And we had retail space right across the country. We broke into the US. But we'd phone our clients and we said, look, if you double your order, we'll sing you a song. We had 2 guitars there on a speakerphone. And we'd be like Christmas. We'd be singing Christmas carols down. And people would be doubling their order. Like, we had a really fresh and fun way, to build businesses. So, yeah, so I started to keep applying the principles of, not being limited by my vision, challenging my own money blueprint and my money mindset, and not being afraid to ask for more, and feeling that I could deserve more, and I've made $1 million in a day, but it's certainly, how do you get there is, again, through this idea of contribution and being fearless, being able to walk into situations. And that's what these muscles I built over these years is I'm comfortable in every situation and I trust myself in them, right?
But over that period of time, over that next decade, you built multiple million and multi-million dollar companies. And you did it in, like you mentioned, in lots of different areas, from hospitality to real estate and including network marketing. So the question I have is, how do you approach learning the skill set that's needed to grow a company that large? Like, lightning strikes, once, that's one thing. But to do it over and over and over again, there's a strategy in place.
Well, it's interesting, right? If you ever watch Shark Tank, right? I really love listening to Mark Cuban, and here's this billionaire, right? And I love, I don't see it very often, but I enjoy listening to them, what inspires them and who they invest in. And it always comes down to the character. The idea can be great, but they often, and I've watched Mark Cuban do this a number of times, where he didn't love the idea, but he loved the person, right? And the hustle. And Mark still talks about the hustle. I mean, he was a hustler, right? He turns his into billions. I tend to live life like Mark doesn't like going outside. He's not an outdoors guy. I live an adventure. I live every day like an adventure. So I'm not so interested in becoming a multi-billionaire. I'm interested in living a great life. So, I have a great relationship with money, but I don't aspire to, be consumed by it like some other people. But what I love and what I had is this thing. I'd start something and I would give it so much energy. I'd knock on more doors. You talk about a natural products distribution company. I would throw our racks into a trailer. I would drive across the country and I went and banged on every single health food store. And I would double and triple and quadruple the size of our company in months, because I just banged on enough doors. And so the same principle I used to building my window cleaning business is the same principle. I don't sit behind fancy ideas. Like, for example, I started an advertising company in Kelowna. And the reason I started it was because I was the president CEO of a network marketing company at the time. When I resigned on principle, we were 3 years in, I'd grown this thing, we were quite large, and the board of directors, they didn't want to pay our associates what they deserved because they were earning more money than them as doctors. So I resigned. But because I resigned, my assistant resigned with me. And her mom called me the next day and she said, "Hey, listen, I'm worried about, Courtney, what she's going to do." I said, "Don't worry, we'll start a company for her." Right. So I came up with this idea, and it was like, we called it miniature menus. And I just printed something on a computer. I had this rack, and I went out and I just banged on doors. We did $34,000 that first week. Right. And I had this half-cooked idea, and I just went out and banged on enough doors, and we set this up. She ran that company for 7 years. Right? We made millions and millions of dollars. We were right across the entire country, but Alberta, BC, we had a very, very thriving business, and it allowed her to do quite well. But that's the difference. The difference is I don't get ready to get ready. I just say, okay, give me a quarter of the idea. I'm gonna go and bang on enough doors and figure out if it's working. Right? So I don't invest. I actually always believe that you don't need to invest a lot of money in a company. But if you can talk to enough people with the idea, and you can see what's responding. People respond with a yes and they love it and they start buying it. Great, you're onto something. If they're 40 people say no, you better sit back down and say, okay, something's not working here. It's either what I'm saying, it's the look, it's the feel, it's the angle. Either it's going to work or not work. So that's how I've done it always. If I think of every company, even my restaurant, I still went out and talked to everyone in town, and we did $1 million that first year in this restaurant. And restaurant business is a hard business. And we got the whole town behind this restaurant. We had lineups on the weekend. But guess what? I went and spoke to everyone in the town. I built rapport, built relationships, banged on doors. And I use it the whole time. I don't think you can build it from the ivory tower, right?
My God, there's so many directions I want to go in now. You really are one of the most fascinating guys in the world. So now you got all these multi-million-dollar companies. You're going in and out of them. You're flipping them. You're selling them. And you went to an event that was held by T. Harv Eker, and that started a new career for you. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, you've really done some homework. This is amazing. My wife and I were struggling, Pam and I. Again, she's Swedish, and our marriage is kind of on the rocks. I was a different kind of cat, and I still hadn't got to the place inside. Lots of things were doing great, but I was carrying a lot of old stuff. Again, I had no relationship with my mom at the time. It was just a lot of. I never really committed to a relationship. I sort of glanced through things. So, this whole idea of having children and raising a family and I was this hustler and this traveler, and I really had to sort of find a new place inside of me to settle, right? And that wasn't happening with Pam and I. And so she asked me to go to this personal development program called Warrior Camp, which is Harv Eker's extreme kind of camp. She said, "Would you come to this thing and see if, it can help our marriage?" I said, "Absolutely." And I didn't know what it was. She told me what to pack the day before. We drove up into the mountains of Whistler and we spent 7 days on this warrior camp. And halfway through the second day, I looked at her and I said, "I'm going to teach this program." And she said, I know. And because what had happened a few years before, I'd emceed a wedding that had gone horribly wrong. The groom's side of the family all got up and left the wedding. Some of them didn't speak to him for a year. Oh my God, it was a mess. And so I was like, I even flew to Europe for I think 8 weeks because I couldn't face any of my friends or my family. It was like total public humiliation. And what it was is I emceed his wedding, and he said, don't do anything conventional. So I went over the top. I'd seen this comedian at a golf tournament, and I stole I borrowed all of his shtick and brought it to a wedding. And it would have been great with a bunch of drunken golfers, but in a wedding with old grandmas and blue rinses, and I pushed the boundary to such an extent. And and so to feel that depth of humiliation, and I carried that for about 4 years, and I kept thinking about it. And my wife would look at me, she'd say, "Stop thinking about it." And I kept trying to go back in time and fix this. I never felt that much humiliation and that, like, oh my God, to ruin a wedding, and it's not just the bride and the groom, it's the families, and all my friends were there, right? And so when I saw this guy on stage doing what he was doing, I said, I can do this. And there was something, he had this magical effect on the room. And so I went up to him at the end of the program and I said, I want to teach this program. And he says, yeah, of course you do. Everyone does. And he was kind of really flippant, right? And so I said, no, seriously. He said, well, no, I understand. He said, but listen, you'd have had to take all my programs to even ask me that question. So I took a year off. Unfortunately, I could take a year off, and I volunteered for him, and I took every program. I bought the Quantum Leap package, and I took 13 or 11, maybe 11 programs in 1 year, and I took 2 the next year. But I started volunteering, running mics. I worked, but again, what I did was I watched the hardest working person, the most effective person in the room, and I watched what they did. I copied it and did more. And then I was asked to become his assistant. But at the very, very end of it, at the end of the year, we're at Wizard Camp, and I have a certain confidence which can be construed as arrogance sometimes. And he looks at me, he sits me down, he says, David, you are never ever going to be on one of my stages. And he said, you're just not the right fit. And I looked at him, and I just put a whole year, well, almost 14 months of my life, and tens of thousands of dollars, and traveling around the world and volunteering. And I looked at him, I said, you can't stop me. I said, one day you're going to be sick and I'm going to be ready. And I went home and I started videotaping myself, and I had because I took his notes, right? So I knew what he's teaching, and I started to study it. And I started to practice and practice and practice. And then one day he phoned me, and it wasn't long after, 2.5 months later, and he was sick. He had this flu like he's never had. He says, listen, I've got an event in New York. It's 1,600 people, New Jersey. He said, can you do it? I said, yep. And I went there and I did it because his business was about selling personal development, and my sales were identical to his my first time out.
That is that experience, that desire, then you actually doing it, is what I'm assuming led you to the next stage of your life, which is where you did your own training. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what it is that you do. And I know that some of the programs that you have and have had, I don't know if they're all still in existence, but a few of them are the Enlightened Training Circle, the Journey to the Stage, the Art of Connection, Good to Great, Beyond Courage, and Mastering the Stage. So pick any one of those, and maybe you can kind of just explain what it is that you're doing now.
Well, what happened? I mean, again, I've taken a couple of years off because of my kids, so I'm not doing a lot of events. I do events primarily for one company, so I do probably 1 or 2 events a month, and mostly around the world. So I'm in Singapore coming up, Australia. Good to Great is obviously is about training and speaking. I love training trainers. And because I went through the dark side where I was immobilized for 4 years and then came through to be one of the more effective trainers, and anyone who comes, that sounds very big-headed, but it's not. I understand a room, and because of my understanding of people, I use whole brain accelerated learning, which I learned from Harv and all of his teachers. And I spent a couple of years learning with different masters of this arena of training and speaking. It's like, even a great podcast, right? My podcast, I did 430 shows. Again, I've taken 2 years off because I want to really be focused on my kids right now and be available to them. But my podcast, The Kick-Ass Life, you want the work we do, like your work, and you have great questions and this great sense about you, this great understanding of people. But you want people to listen to something, and you want to fire the brain in such a way that 10 years from now, they can still remember it. And so with my work, I don't I really think about the brain firing in such a way. So I use, kinesthetic, I use audio, I use visual, I use so many different techniques woven in, but really a lot of humor, a lot of fun. But I want to see a radical change in people's lives. And I don't do the change, they do the changing, but I create the environments where transformation can occur. And it's not about me. I mean, people often come up and say, oh, you changed my life. I said, no, you did the change. I just created the environment where you plug yourself into and you're committed to that change. So I want to be that effective that 10 years from now, what the people learn in that room, they can still remember. They find themselves quoting something that happened. And that's the difference between a master trainer. So Good to Great is teaching people the systems, the templates, their personal range. A lot of it's what's happening inside. How do we think? Where do the words come from?
You mentioned that you are going to be going back on the road again to Singapore. So you travel a lot. How many days per year are you on the road?
Well, it depends. This year I took on a lot more because I wanted my son. Because I took on a lot more work than I normally would. So again, we did 9 countries in 2.5 months. So Mexico, Singapore, Fiji, Australia, New Zealand. We went all over, right? So depending, I choose because of passion. I just did an event for 2 leaders out of Australia, and they asked me to come to Vanuatu, which is really one of the happiest places on the planet. Unbelievable. And I said yes because of 2 reasons. One is I'd never been there. So for me, it was like, oh my gosh, of course I want to train there. The second was that they said, well, if we fly your son in and he can come and work the event, that's a bonus. I'll do it for that. But really, life change. So I go in there and I spent 5 days ahead of time and I wrote the program with the topography, with the villages, with the whole island. I took the whole island as the stage and we wrote a program. So they were there for 7 days, right? And we did this incredible leadership training, but using the backdrop of the people on the island. That's what turns my crank. I can see myself doing a lot more adventure, breakthrough stuff, taking people, small groups or large groups or groups like that into the unknown and developing a program real time. You kind of create it as it's happening. I don't like that static stuff and watching what can happen, because again, it's self-trust, right? That's probably the thing I love the most. But how much do I travel? I'd say probably half the year. But I take Julys. I'm always at home. I love to be on my lake here, right? I don't work in Decembers. I work half of August. So I do take big blocks of time off. I'm home for 3 weeks right now. And I was invited to go on a trip to actually on a cruise with a whole group of people. And I declined because I wanted to be here and I wanted to get some writing done. So it's a bit like that.
If you could live anywhere else outside of Canada, which I know you love, where would it be?
It's interesting you asked that question because, I lived on a sailboat for a year and I sailed across the Atlantic in a 45-foot boat and then I hitchhiked all the way through the Caribbean coming up to America. And last week I was down on my friend's yacht. He has an 85-foot yacht. I've never liked yachts or big stink pots, I call them. But, he had a cook and he had this thing and I think, I like I think in chapters. If you think of life as chapters instead of, life. So I think this is the chapter of my life. This chapter of my life is being around for my kids more than I have been and making sure that I can have time with them. So traveling with Ben and designing my life around his needs right now, which is what I'm able to do, right? But when I was on the water for the week, it reminded me of how beautiful it is to live on a boat. And I could see a chapter coming where I potentially would live aboard a boat and move the boat so that it still sort of talks to my spirit, which is this unknown, going into Central and South America or going around, through the Panama Canal or Mexico, that kind of thing, and living on a boat for 3 or 4 or 5 years until I get, to the point where I want a new chapter. That's something cool. I'm a scuba diver. I love the water. I'm a sailor. Right. And it was just sort of reminding me last week of how incredible it is to have that kind of lifestyle and then incorporate it with my business. And this, I've never told anyone. I mean, I've told one other person this, but I'm telling you this. But I'd like to do it with an 80-foot yacht, maybe with a couple of other people that want that lifestyle and who would love to be on the yacht at the same time, but big enough where if you want to bring in 8 clients or 8 students and do high-level coaching, that you could incorporate that. So that's something that's just brand new in my brain. It just happened because of what happened last week. And now I'm I've already started negotiating on a boat. So that's how crazy I am. So that could be me, right? But I haven't decided yet. I'm still, where I live. I live in the most beautiful part of the world. So
Well, yeah. I mean, we'll get into your Instagram handle so people can take a look at the view from your living room, dining room. It's one of the most spectacular things that I've ever seen. I've never been there. I haven't gotten the invite yet. But
you've got the invite. I told you, I'm going to invite you again publicly. You had the invite. Get your ass up here and stop whining.
How many suitcases do you carry on a trip, and what are your travel non-negotiables?
All right. Look, I tell you one thing that I when you talk about life by design, my big thing's life by design. Now, look, I lived a lot of my life with no money, and now I have money, right? If I lost it all tomorrow, I could window clean again. I have no attachment. And I know it sounds kind of odd, but what I've done, I tell my people is write a list of all the things you don't like to do and all the things you love to do. So there's certain things I don't like to do. Like I don't like unpacking suitcases, right? I don't like shopping. And things I don't like. So what I do is I have a staff of people that do the things I don't like, so I can focus only on the things I like. So I have a housekeeper, and I have I have an assistant, I have a bookkeeper. But I know all the things. So I try to do in my life only the things I love. So with travel non-negotiables, right, is I don't like packing, but I have to pack. That's one of the things I have to do because it's there, right? I always carry one case with just the nutritional products that I use. I've been using them for almost 14 years. I carry a blender with me, and I carry one suitcase that's full of products. I always take too many clothes, and the reason I know why it is because I lived out of a backpack for so many years that I never know if I want to come home. So I always think, well, I'll take that just in case. Because if I decide to change my plans and I want to go on to somewhere else, I've got stuff with me. So I seem to always overpack, and I'm always overweight. So I carry typically 2 suitcases, and I carry my computer bag. Non-negotiables now is I love traveling in style. I like flying first class. I will move days to have a better flight. When I go, because I work, let's say I'm going into Singapore, I will never fly in and fly out, do the job and leave. I want to have an experience wrapped around my work. So I always go in, I always book time either before or after or both, where I can go and immerse myself in the culture of the country I'm in. And I see a lot of corporate people, they go in, they fly in, they do the thing, they fly out. They just don't, I can't imagine flying across the world and not doing something in New Zealand that I want to remember it 10 years from now. And I think like that. So I think in, this idea of travel, and people complain about a 17-hour flight. Oh my gosh, you ring a bell, someone brings you a drink. You ring I don't care if you're in first class or not. You can still ring a bell and someone's going to serve you. But the idea that we're traveling in this capsule across the world and we can step out in a whole new culture, I still get excited. I love long flights. So again, non-negotiables is to really, when I'm in a culture or when I get off a plane, is to do something that I want to remember 10 years from now. I want to create stories. So I'm a story writing machine. I want to say yes to things. I want to do crazy things. I want to stay up too late before the event. You say, oh, you should get a good night's sleep. Why? Why don't I go out and I'll still be able to work the next day? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Makes total sense. I want to do a rapid fire round of questions with you. It's basically a first thing that comes to mind rounds. So what would your friends say is one of your superpowers?
Fearless.
What's one of the things that you're afraid of right now?
Commitment.
Wait, what's the one thing that you want to get better at?
Focus.
What one book have you reread the most?
West with the Night by Beryl Markham. She was the first woman aviator in Africa, and she's the first person to fly east to west across the Atlantic. Her life was remarkable, and she just inspires me that she was, she used to hunt with the Maasai, and, this is this, white girl who saw a plane and she learned in the cockpit. I'm a pilot, right? And so just the idea of flying a biplane across Africa at a time where there's no lights. And the first chapter is called Mugway, and she's flying a cylinder to the mines in Africa over Africa at night, alone in her biplane, delivering this oxygen. And she's just such a beautiful writer. And I have lots of personal development books, but that one there inspires me to just live an extraordinary life and never be afraid of the unknown, right?
What's the one thing that you own that you probably should throw out, but you never will? Yeah, in other words, you got it and you look at it, you're like, I gotta get rid of this thing. But every time you're like, I can't get rid of this thing.
It's really only closed because I don't keep any. I'm really good at. When you come to my house, you'll see. I mean, I have no clutter anywhere. I just realize I don't, and I'm not attached to anything, so I don't actually carry anything around. But I think, I should get rid of it. I don't think I do. If I can think about something, I will. But clothes, sometimes we clothes. Oh yeah, I'll keep that. And my wardrobe has got so much crap in it, and it's like that would probably be my nemesis.
You did get rid of those hot pans from the window cleaning days, though, right?
my friend brought him to a party the other day because they called me the Guatemala man because I used to sew a lot. So I used to sew, I used to do a lot of my own repairs because my grandmother was a seamstress, and like I can't believe it, I couldn't get him past my knees. That's how big I've got, and I'm pretty fit, right? Anyway.
All right, final question. If you had to give a TED Talk on nothing that you're known for or nothing that you speak about, and it could be on anything that you like to do, anything that you have a passion for, or anything else at all, what would it be?
Cooking.
Wow, I didn't expect that. Cooking.
Well, there's just something about, or really hosting, but the idea of, because what cooking has taught me, I love to cook, and what cooking's taught me, this on so many levels, it's everything. It's the process, but then it's the sharing, and it's the creating these memories. I love hosting people at my house, and I love everything to be magical. The music, everything, and but I love the whole process. When I'm cooking, I love making bread, but it just taught me a lot about developing flavors. I mean, and there's so much to learn, and it's so deep and it's so rich. But the result is always when you're putting something in your mouth and you're looking across the table at your friends and you're laughing, and you put so much love into this, and there again you're creating this memory that hopefully you'll remember for the rest of your life. And I can remember meals with my friends, and just the laughter and the great wine and just the everything, ambiance, and everything's important, right? I think that's it. Everything's important.
Well, I got to tell you, this interview was something I've been waiting for a long time for. You did not let down. You have been an inspiration to me, Kim, and so many people. You are truly an example of a life lived so well. So thank you. Do you have any final words, suggestions, or an ask for the people that are listening?
I'd like to answer that question. I struggle with it, but what people could ask, just how do I have an extraordinary life? Because we wrap it up with money. I'll give you an example. Yesterday, this guy, his name's Cosmin, he came to my house. He's from Romania, and he's struggling. He's a priest who built a church in America, and he came up here, and he's really struggling. He works with his hands, and he doesn't like his job, and I feel the energy on him, but he's this lit up guy that would have so much impact. And I challenged him, we just started talking, and I said, I feel the heaviness in you. What's going on? And he shared with me that, he's just not liking what he's doing, and he has this vision to build this church, and it's not going as well. He has these two daughters. And I said, can I challenge you? He said, yeah. I said, what if tomorrow, or even tonight, when you jump in that car, instead of you disliking what you're doing, what if you just start to love it, and you start to bring that energy that's within you, the thing that you want to share with the world, you bring it to your toilet you're going to fix tomorrow, and the blinds, he repairs apartment buildings. I said, and think about every time you do something, every lock you fix, every step you clean, that you're improving someone's life, because he works in a lot of lower end buildings. I said, but what if you start bringing that magic and that gratitude, and you go to work tomorrow and you're completely lit up? I said, what do you think you're going to attract? What do you think is going to happen? I said, because then the next opportunity is waiting, but it can only meet you if you love the moment you're in. And you may want it to look different, but guess what? The universe, and you believe in God, your God is saying, no, not right now. You got to feel this. You got to go through this valley, but why not charge through the valleys lit up with gratitude, with passion, with fun? And so you come home with a full cup for your daughters, because right now when you're coming home half empty because you're hating what you're doing. I said, and I said, and if you believe in divine intervention, then we're meant to have this conversation. We're meant to be talking right now. And then I said to him, and you're struggling to build a church? I said, and I brought him upstairs and I showed him my podcasting studio. It's tiny, right? $340 investment. You can talk to the world. I said, why not build a different church without walls? Why not? We started talking about imagining his life, that all he's got to do to have everything, to have extraordinary. It's not about money. It's not about where you live. I don't care. I mean, I've lived under ping pong tables, with 9 guys in a frat house. It doesn't matter where the question is, extraordinary is a state of mind. Extraordinary is in the worst moments, in the hardest times, in the times where you're really dragging your sorry ass around, that you realize how grateful you are to just be alive, and you start to live through that gratitude, and you start to show up and start noticing people and being kinder, being more compassionate, smiling more, laughing more, touching more, inviting more, and watch what happens. And then the extraordinary happens. Someone's going to notice and say, oh, you have such beautiful energy. I'd love to work with you. Hey, listen, what do you want? And this is where the magic happens. And I think, that's the question. If people ask more, it's just like extraordinary. Every one of us, I don't care if you're at home right now and you're going through a messy divorce, go through it elegantly. Put a smile back on your face. Remember, struggle, it takes 2 people to struggle, right? I believe in divine divorce, elegant separations. I believe that you can be best friend. And again, but it takes one. It takes one person. So extraordinary is something that we can experience every moment of every day, with or without money. And I can say that with authority because I've been in both.
What a beautiful answer. But then I have a follow-up question for you, and that would be, what would the approach look like for that particular gentleman to tackle the extraordinary life that he can have? So in other words, deep inside him, he's got this desire that you're able to see that's in there to do something else, but he's got a block. He's not willing to do it.
Yeah, his block is control. So what I said to him, I said, tell me, right now, what's the one thing you think if you could shift? What would it look like for you to be able to go through that door? And he said, I want to control everything. And see, the thing is that everything's fluid, right? Everything's fluid. Everything's moving. That's where self-trust comes from. William Whitecloud wrote a book called The Magician's Way. And in The Magician's Way, he talks about, expectations are the enemy. Detachment is the ally, for all of our best intentions, we can think that this is going to happen in a certain way or a certain sequence. But the truth is, those people that truly succeed is when things don't go as we want, we just adapt. We adapt. And we move with what's actually happening, not what we wish is happening. What's going on with him? He had a picture of coming here, meeting a few people, them investing in him, building a church, and they had to be a certain type of person with a certain type of belief. And, and everything about his rigidity makes it impossible for him to be happy. Right? So all he's got to do is let go of control and flow with what's actually happening. And the fact he has deep faith in his God is that he can say, hey, listen, this is all meant to be happening. I mean, I always believe that everything's meant to be happening. But the fact is, when we go, we can notice whether we're feeling better about something or worse. We feel worse, we just turn. We adjust. We adjust our mindset or we adjust our course, but we get to control it. So, which means it doesn't matter how bad things are. They will become our greatest stories. Look at how many stories I've shared today, that could have been morose. I wouldn't go back and change and hope my mom and dad stayed together. They would have been terrible together, right? And so the idea, though, that, he has to let go of his expectations and his control in order for him to follow the magic that will open up in front of him, because his spirit is so strong. It's just suffocated now by this, oh my God, it's not working. And he's fearful for his 2 daughters because, he has to make an income and he has to try and create a new start. Does that make sense?
It does. So how does he let go of the control if the control is there in some way to serve him, or at least in quotes, serve him so that he can make the income for his kids?
Well, what's great, and that's why I challenged him. I said, look, this is something, I said, when do you want to let go of the control? And he said, well, right away. I said, well, great, let's do it. So let's think of where are you most controlled? Let's give me an example of where you want to have control. And then what we'll do is we'll practice, because it's a practice. It's not like I had to practice you're being fearless, right? Fearless means that I don't get scared about many things. Even my son will say that when we were doing Adrenaline Week. He says, Dad, how come you're never scared? I say, because I don't think about the next step. I think about the step I'm in. But I practice that. I practice staying present on each step. So by the time you get to the bungee site, I'm still there, but I'm practicing one thing at a time, right? So for him, how does he do it? Well, there's a feeling in the body. When you're in control, when you're trying to control something that's not going well, then you're going to feel something, right? So that's the notice. So he's going to notice that, okay, I'm getting uptight. I'm feeling tense. My energy's dropping. My thoughts are becoming darker. But there's going to be, every time he hits that wall, he's going to feel something. He's got to start to notice what the feeling is. And then he's got to choose. All right, so what do I choose now? Do I choose the control where this feeling's there, or do I change my focus? So a lot of it is focus and then action. So he's going to have to change what he's focusing on and take a step towards the things he wants. So then, and so again, and he'll talk to me about this a few more times, but first we notice what's going on in the body. All right. If we keep feeling that, so if you're doing something right now at home and you're not feeling great, notice what you're doing, your physiology first, right? Notice how you're feeling. Now, what if you change your focus and then take a new leap with your body? You physically move. So now you're focused on something new and you're physically moving through something new. What's going to happen is there's going to be a shift of energy that's going to be complete. All right. You'll leave the energy behind. You're focusing on something and you'll notice, okay, I'm feeling great. I'm feeling powerful. I'm feeling like I can do this. Great. Well, keep doing that. And then you find yourself course correct again and you start to feel this heaviness again. Hey, I don't want that. So then what it is this constant understanding of what our physical and our emotional body is doing, so that, hey, and the quickest way out, change of focus, change of action. Boom, boom, right? And sometimes crank the music up. Just dance. Just freaking dance. Dance and scream, right? Afterwards, how do you feel? You feel alive again. What are you focused on now? Focus on what you want. Don't focus on the things you can't get, right?
You know, we're going to have to do a part 2. That's all there is to it, because I've already said goodbye, and here we go. We're starting a new episode. So this is David. What can I say, man? Thank you so much for taking the time with me. Thank you for going all in. Thank you for being fearless. Thank you for impacting the people that are around me on such a positive way. I mean, you're just incredible. So I'm just so grateful to have you in my life.
Well, thank you. And I look forward to it. And I want to say again, the invite is open anytime. You're always welcome. And thank you for what you're doing. And I'm so glad that you're doing this, that your level of understanding is coming out into the world through your podcast. So congratulations. And just one last thing, it's David T.S. Wood. David T.S. Wood is my Facebook, and David T.S. Wood is my Instagram, if anyone wants to sort of hook up there.
Awesome. I was going to put that into the intro and in the show notes, but it's good that we have it here too. This way nobody misses it. Thank you again, David.
All right. I love you, brother.
All right. Thanks for listening. If you love this episode and you know someone that needs some help in either stepping up their work hard game or their play hard game, it would mean the world to me if you shared this podcast with them to help me get this movement out there. So if you like what you heard, head on over to iTunes, take 30 seconds and leave me a 5-star review, and I will be forever grateful. So until the next episode, excuses are over. It's time to live.